Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of SuperNova Commencements. I am your host, Kashi Sehgal, and we have another great show. Like always, we have a great guest today, and he's going to be super fun to talk to. But before we get to our guest, let's talk about our Career Powered by Data segment, brought to us by our partners at Steppingblocks. I tell you guys every week, they have a ton of data, 100 million people worth of data, and they can help you figure out what you need to know about an industry you might be interested in or a career. So let's talk today about civil engineering. This is something that's close to my heart because my dad is a civil engineer and then went on to do very interesting things. So let's talk about civil engineering. The most common educational background, most common degree you would get is in, that's right, let's say it all together, civil engineering. I know that was a no-brainer. There are about 400,000 people in the industry. The average age of the industry is 40, so it's a little older than some of the industries that we have talked about in the last couple of weeks. 38% female, so very highly skewed male. And it's 2% veteran, which we don't see a lot of veterans within industry. So that's great to see. Top skills. So civil engineering, AutoCAD, which is a software that helps you create building designs, and it's used by architects and engineers and city planners and graphic designers. And then stormwater and drainage techniques. Very interesting. I have definitely heard my dad tell stories about that. And then skills that make the most, because you always ask, land development, site planning, and bridges. And I've also heard my dad talk about that. So bridges are important. We all know that. Across the country, most people come from these schools: Penn State, Texas A&M, and Purdue. Obviously, they come from many other schools, but these were the top three. All right, so the reason we're talking about civil engineering today is because it's kind of related to our guest background. I mean, it is, but he's doing a lot more now, and he's doing very interesting things with it. So let's bring him on screen. Hello, KP.
Hey there.
Welcome. So, everyone, KP Reddy is founding general partner for Shadow Ventures, and he's a serial entrepreneur and a tech investor. So we've got a lot of fun things to talk about. KP, can you just start us off by telling us where you're from and where you went to school and what you majored in?
Yeah, I grew up all through elementary school in Stone Mountain, Georgia, so it's about as native as it gets. My parents decided to move back to India, so I went to high school in India. And then came back here and went to Georgia Tech, civil engineering. But I'm a second generation civil engineer, so kind of grew up around it and in it and going to the office with my dad. So had early exposure to the civil engineering world. So it made sense when I went to college. But I'd also been writing code since I was 13 and opted, basically thought like, I already know how to code. Like, why would I get a degree in that? Can't kind of learn civil engineering on the side. So, but did not stay in the profession for very long. Stayed in as a civil engineer for about 4 years before I started building startups.
Yeah. So you made your Indian parents very happy by going into one of the careers that makes them happy: doctor, lawyer, engineer, maybe consultant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Actually, when I was growing up, lawyer was a bad one.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
my brother's a lawyer. He kind of it's like, what do you mean? It was pretty much when I was growing up, it was either engineer or doctor. So there was nothing.
Okay. All right. Well, so you made up for it. So walk us through how you got from school and civil engineering to where you are today, just high level.
Yeah. Basically, I put myself through school, so worked a lot. And then while going to school, I started basically building websites on the side for people. Georgia Tech civil program was actually early days of the internet, so started doing a lot on the internet then, but chose to kind of go ahead and work in the profession and kind of learn the fundamentals of engineering. But then quickly decided I wanted to build tech companies. So me and a partner, we cash advanced $60,000 against our credit cards collectively and started our company. We were focused on serving the construction company, basically construction management on the web in 1997. And the construction industry told us that the internet was a fad, that it was for games. It was just not something that was going to last. So we're running out of credit card limits. So we pivoted and we basically ended up going into the telecom industry and did very well there. And so me and my partner, we grew that from 2 people to 1,200 people in about 3.5 years. Went public, and kind of that was the jump start.
Okay, so lots to dig into. What is it like to take a company public?
It's
hard.
It's one of the worst. It depends on how you're wired. I've been a believer that you spend all your time with your customers and employees, and usually your employees being, sales and product. When you go public, you find yourself spending no time with customers, and you spend all your time with your CFO and your HR people. And actually, when I left my own company, it was because I realized it'd been a year since I'd met a customer. It'd been a year since I'd talked to pretty much anyone doing the work in my company. It was all HR and finance and investor relations and roadshow. And I just think it depends on what you want. If you want to continue to build a company, being public, we always say being public is an exit. It's a monetary exit. It's also probably a professional exit for many.
Very interesting way to look at that. Yeah, there are companies like, I can think of like MailChimp, who are still private, but are doing extremely well and could easily go public. So like, what's the trade-off?
The trade-off is control. And, there's a term called financialism that's very big in America, which is you live quarter to quarter. I mean, if as a public company, as a leader of a public company, your job security lasts quarter to quarter. If you don't meet expectations in a quarter, you may not have a job the next quarter. And I think companies like MailChimp, they're able to kind of do whatever they want to do, invest their capital however they want to invest. They can prioritize their culture. They can prioritize a lot of things and not have to worry about this third-party investor that's going to judge them every quarter. I mean, if you think about it, it's a pretty tough living to re-interview for your job every quarter, which is kind of what running a public company is like.
Yeah, definitely. Because you're not just performing for one investor, you're performing for like everyone who is bought in. So yeah, that's not hard. That's not easy. That's hard. Yeah. Okay. So you started a bunch of companies. Let's go back to the beginning. What was it like to start your first company? What skill set is required to really be an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah. I think it is 110% sales. And if you can't sell, you should not be an entrepreneur, full stop. I think because it's the ability to connect needs and opportunity. And that translates to customers, that translates to employees. You're always selling somebody, you're selling an investor. And I don't think it's being good at sales is less about, having a great golf game and being good at pitching or whatever. It's less about that. It's really, to me, sales is really being able to connect the dots between two parties. And I think that's what you have to be really good at. And, for me, I've never raised venture capital, which is always the funny thing. People think, oh,
you have never raised, I didn't realize that.
I've never raised money.
Yeah, you do assume that you have.
No, it's, my first company was 100% bootstrapped from credit cards and that kind of thing. And I think, if you can get a customer, if you can sell something, and also be transparent and find the right customers, you can grow a great business without raising a single dollar. I think one of the challenge, there is a point where if you really want to scale, you may have to take on outside capital. But honestly, most startups are more focused on raising money than they are finding customers and delivering an amazing experience to their customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think bootstrapping is so important. It makes you more focused and creative, and you're really honed in on what makes you special.
Yeah, and it also drives focus. I think I tell people all the time the number one skill any great entrepreneur has to have, besides selling, is really understanding the difference between friction and an immovable object, because you really only have so many resources to your disposal, and you can't keep pushing on something that's not going to go anywhere. So it's all about focus, and it's all about really, high intensity. This idea that you can have work-life balance in the early stages of your startup, it's not real. I mean, none of it's real. You really, it's 120 hours a week. It is that. And, and I think I think there's a little bit of people look from the outside and they think one thing, and the realities are very different.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to entrepreneurs? I mean, it does take 120 hours a week or 500 hours a week if you can find it. Mm-hmm. What do you say to entrepreneurs who are starting a side hustle and don't have 120 hours a week to give, but are still trying to get their business off the ground?
I think it depends on why you're in business. Are you in business to make money, or are you in business because it's something you enjoy doing? And I have friends that think about your friends that might side hustle starting like a chocolate company, right? Are they doing it because they want to take on Hershey's, or are they doing it because it's a great way to pay for their supplies and buy more toys? And I have a lot of friends that they end up doing these woodworking things and sell it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, if I can buy another piece of equipment and justify it, then I'm going to do it. So I think motives are the biggest driver. Why are you doing a side hustle? If it is to just make money, then that's a different dynamic than I want to do something that I enjoy. And if I can make a couple bucks and pay for the supplies and write off the annual conference of knitting enthusiasts or whatever it is, right? Then go do it. Go do it that way. I don't think not everything has to be about scale. Not everything has to be about scale.
Yeah. Lifestyle business, which is what you would people call those kinds of businesses. I don't love that term. I feel like people look at that in the startup world like it's not as worthwhile as scaling the big business to $3 billion valuation,
Right.
But there is a place for having a business that just allows you to live the life you want. Mm-hmm. So
no, and honestly, some businesses are just designed that way. That's just how they are, and there's no way around it. And I think, look, most of the people that have a negative view of lifestyle businesses are people that are either on the investment side. And I tell people all the time, I probably, out of every 10 calls, 8 of the calls, I'm talking entrepreneurs out of taking venture capital, because they're wasting their time, they're wasting their energy. And unfortunately, the ecosystem of startups and investors, everybody's very nice, but they're not very kind. They really don't tell people the truth. And it was interesting. This entrepreneur was like, well, Techstars and YC and all these people told me X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, they're all wrong. That is the only answer they have. They don't have an answer that says, go build a nice $5 million year revenue company and pocket $1 million in cash flow a year. They don't know that move. Yeah. So they're going to tell you what they know, and that's not what they know.
That's so interesting. And I love how you put that. We can be nice, but we're not very kind. And that there is a difference there for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are now in this world called built tech, and it's really a term that you have helped pioneer and an industry that you've helped pioneer. Mm-hmm. did you get into this? What the heck is it? Let's start there.
Yeah. So coming out of civil, so built tech and the built environment is pretty much everything, all the physical things you see around you, whether it's a bridge, whether it's a building, whether it's a stadium, a road, that's everything around you. And I really believe that our industry, whether you're an architect or a civil engineer or a construction company, real estate developer, we're the last industry that really creates and designs things of great permanence and that affect everything from the economy to people's quality of lives, to community, to social agendas. You design an iPhone and you throw it away in 3 years, right? It's the stuff we think of to have to do is like 50 and 100 years, right? And I think we're kind of the last market and industry that has to think about it that way, kind of predict the future. And, I honestly got back into it. I was not thrilled about it. So if you think my first startup was very focused on, construction, had to pivot to telecom. I was like, great, my industry is so behind. The people that I know and love, salt of the earth people, they're so far behind. My next startup was in the same space, had the same struggles, somehow was able to exit that company. And kind of after that gave up on the industry. I was like, this industry is never going anywhere. And I kind of went into kind of semi-retirement mode and said, I'm not going to do anything. And then I started, I went and started working at ATDC, which was a good place to onboard into the real world after taking 2 years off. And just kind of, get involved. And honestly, I started getting calls from my friends in industry at civil engineering firms saying, hey, have you seen this innovation or that innovation? And we want to invest. And I was like, who are you people? You're the people that thought fax machines were forever. Like, what is that? And I really had a very negative view. I was like, I'm never going to get involved again. Like, it's just these people keep giving me the head fake and I'm just not doing it. And I tell people, you're lucky if in your lifetime, if the market moves towards you versus you having to chase the market. And I'm super fortunate. I got back into this, call it 4 years ago, 3 years ago. We started the firm 3 years ago, and the market has moved towards us, which, it doesn't happen often. So we feel pretty fortunate about that from a day-to-day perspective. But, whether you believe in climate change or not, whether you believe in any of it, the built environment is the number one contributor to greenhouse gases, to the environment. When you build a building, check out the construction dumpsters. 20% of the building ends up in the construction dumpster. There's so much waste. You calculate all the waste in construction, we could give everyone on the planet a free home. Like, it's that much.
Wow.
And so when I started thinking about like the next chapter of what I wanted to do, it sounds terrible, but making money is easy. That's never been a hard thing for me. And it was more like, how am I going to make money? And why am I going to make money? And why am I going to care? And why am I going to care about recruiting the people around me? How am I going to tell people, hey, let's go do this and be excited about it? And I don't think money is very rarely the right recruitment tool. Lots of people can offer someone 10 cents more a year. It's not a big deal. But that's why I started getting focused on this. And once again, fortunately, the market keeps moving our way. I think if you look at the news lately, we look at it and we're like, yeah, this is what we've been living what I've been living with for the last 25 years of my career. So great. It's fun because, we're the experts in the field and it doesn't happen often.
Is the build tech and that space related to smart cities in any way, in the sense, we've talked about smart cities on the show, but like, could it help with something COVID related or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that's what everybody's reframing now is, how do we want to live? Look, COVID was a catalyst for I would say a lot of people got to think critically about themselves and their own purpose on this planet. You isolate people for long enough, they have to look at the mirror and ask lots of questions of themselves. I think we've also questioned, like, I think we all got to step off the treadmill for a second and kind of look around. And I think it's driving a lot of behavior, both like how we want to work, how we want to live. I was talking to a group this morning that's doing a whole build to rent community. In other words, people don't want to be in apartments with common walls. They want to be in individual structures. So they're building 150 single family homes that are all for rent, because it turns out not everybody can afford to buy a home, but they want to rent and they want to be in a rental community. They want to be in that level of a community. And so it's interesting, what people are, how they're thinking about it. But even around smart cities, it's all highly inefficient. You just look at traffic. I mean, we're in Atlanta, so everybody loves to talk about traffic. No matter how many lanes you keep adding, no matter how many Lexus lanes and toll roads,
we'll never fix anything.
We are like air. We will occupy the space provided to us. That's just how it is. And so it's always thinking about, how do you think about smarter, and how do you think about that experiential? And, what if your phone told you, it's 7:38, it's time for you to leave to work because this is the optimal time for you to go to work, and factored in your stop at Starbucks. So there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in terms of how we think about our experiences.
Yeah, I get that alert on my phone, or I used to, back when we used to do those things, like go out in public. And it would always stress me out because I'm like, oh no, I still have an email to send.
Yeah.
I know. So you talked about ATDC, and I want to talk about that time for a bit. So the ATDC is the Atlanta Technology Development Center. It's at Georgia Tech. Can you talk about the rise of startup incubators? It feels like they're really kind of everywhere, like on every block. Yeah. So is that a good thing? Or like, how do you choose the right startup incubator? What do you look for?
Yeah, I am not a fan of incubators per se. I think what's happened is, ATDC it's one of the oldest in the country. It started at a time where just having high-speed internet access was an amenity, right? Like you're on a dial-up modem at home. And so I think most incubators that are highly focused on space and amenities and infrastructure are less relevant today than they've ever been. And so when I was at ATDC, the big thing we really focused on was connectivity to Georgia Tech, connectivity to resources. But at the same time, I've had several startups that I've coached and told them to stay away from incubators because the social aspect of it is not good. I mean, there's a little bit of, hey, they have a coffee shop or they're doing happy hour and a lot of that social thing, which is funny because at ATDC, when I was running it, I had to beg people to come out. If we had like a happy hour, I had to go door to door and like threaten people to come to happy hour because they're all too busy working, And I think the culture of incubators and the social aspect of it is a massive, massive distraction to a startup. You're better off being in your basement, banging out code and doing the work. And unfortunately, I think there's definitely a bias around a lot of the incubators where if you're someone that's up and coming and don't have the right resources and don't have a privileged advantage, and you're surrounding yourself with people that are not worried about their next meal or paying rent, and you get sucked into that social construct, it's a really tough spot to be in. And I think people don't really understand the whole story of a lot of entrepreneurs are playing startup and their parents have plenty of money and they're not worried about it. Very few of them lived out of their car for 6 months or anything like I did. It's like that's not something. So I think there's a little bit of clickiness that happens with incubators, and I don't think the resources that they actually provide are that important to a startup. There's a little bit of like, you got to go figure it out and go do the work, and everything else is a distraction.
So how do you find a good one? Like, how do you find a program that's worth being a part of? And when is it right for you? I mean, it may not be right, like you're saying.
I think it all comes down to the people. Like, who are the people? Who are you going to be engaging with? I think that's what it comes down to. We run a global incubator. It's never been about space. That's never been anything that we offered. We're now down to about 17% acceptance, and they get one-on-one time with me. They get one-on-one time with my CTO. It's not, oh, go attend this class. I'm like, there's YouTube. Go take a class on YouTube. Like, I don't need to teach you about customer discovery or something. There's plenty of resources to do that. What you need is someone to help you troubleshoot and problem solve and dig in and help, be like a teammate almost. And I think that's what you have to really think about. It's like, what do you get out of it? I mean, getting some space, who cares, right? I mean, who cares about space?
Right.
Who are you going to get time with, and how are they going to help? And is it the type of help you need? I think ATDC, one of the things we learned was our average entrepreneur was a lot older. They didn't need to understand the basics of accounting. This was their third startup. What they really needed is kind of thinking about new tech stacks and access to R&D and a little bit more complicated things, kind of grown up stuff. I think you just have to look at that. And like, who are the people you're going to engage with is super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that a leader can really do for their company is block and tackle so that the company can excel. And if you're an entrepreneur and don't have that support above you, then what you're saying is it's helpful to have maybe somebody from an incubator or somebody play that role for you to help you problem solve and figure out how to navigate the things that are going on.
I think it's also important. Do not take advice and work with people that have not been there and done that. Stay away from the academics, stay away from the people that call themselves coaches. The minute you see their LinkedIn profile and says coach, automatic no, right? Like automatic no. Thought leader, automatic no. I think it's super important you look at their background, because as a startup founder, you have to value your time above anyone else's time. And if you're going to go spend an hour in a coaching session with someone that's never done it and just talks about doing it, you're wasting an hour of your time. It's not about their time. It's about your time.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay. You wrote a book, and it's called What You Know About Startups Is Wrong. How to Navigate Entrepreneurial Urban Legends That Threaten Your Relationships, your health, your finances, and your career.
Yep.
Okay. So it's about myths, right, in entrepreneurship. What do you think is one of the biggest myths that exist around entrepreneurship?
That it's somehow a level playing field and people did not have advantages. There are very, very few self-made people. I think I talk about Bill Gates. Bill Gates' dad was one of the top patent attorneys in Seattle. His mom was on the board of the American Cancer Society, and was board members with the CEO of IBM. So when Bill Gates needed to do a deal with IBM, his mom helped him do the deal. So there's a little bit of this stuff where people think like, oh no, they did X, Y, and Z.
He just dropped out and magically all this happened. Yeah.
First of all, that whole dropped out thing, like Zuckerberg, right? Oh, he dropped out. It's like, but he got in. Let's start there. He got in is really the question. And when people come to me like, well, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out, I'm like, did you get in? Don't talk about people dropping out if you never got in. And I think I've gotten some time, if you think about what Peter Thiel talks about with, his foundation, that, some really smart people get ruined by college. I believe that. But I think it's a very, very small percentage. And the very small percentage of people that get their creativity gets diminished by college is very small. But also those are the same people that would probably ace college, right? It's not because they're bad at, they would do fine. But, in his mind, he'll tell you that it puts too much construct around, too much organization, and they stop being free thinkers. And I think there's a lot of stories like that. The founders of YouTube, it was Jim Barksdale's son-in-law. There's all these. So the big stories that people like to talk about, a lot of times they don't know the backstory. And so if you're someone that doesn't come from, your dad being the top patent attorney and your mom being a a socialite on all the hot nonprofits, you have a different path you have to take, and it's a harder path. And, I mean, people do it. It's not that people don't do it, but you have to be careful about what you want to hold out there as your North Star in terms of making decisions. I tell people, I give away so many copies of my book because, and I tell people, like, give it to your spouse, give it to your significant other. You are passionate and you are excited about doing the startup, and the people around you love you and will support you, but they don't really know what they're signing up for. They really don't know what they're signing up for. Have them read my book and they'll know what they're signing up for.
Yeah, that's so smart. It's like the survival guide for a startup founder's spouse.
Right.
That's information they need for sure.
Because they don't know, right? They're just trying to be supportive. Oh yeah, sure. Like, absolutely, let's do it, and they want to be supportive. And then they read my book and they're like, oh my God, like, this is what it's going to be like.
Yeah. Oh my God, please steer clear.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. A lot of people, I think, buy it thinking it's like tips and tricks or something. It's like, no, I'm actually trying to talk you out of doing a startup is really what I'm doing, because I think people buy into all the other stories.
Yeah. And like this whole thing about the story that you don't know, it reminds me of when people say they were an overnight success, like a band or a startup or whatever. And yeah, they've been doing the work for 12 years. And all of a sudden they're an overnight success because you're just starting to talk about them, but they've been doing the work, So it's good to know the backstory.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, like the pop culture aspect of startup world, I rarely will invest in a founder that I see speaking a lot and blogging a lot and tweeting a lot. I'm like, when are you doing the work?
Yep.
Like, when are you doing the actual work of building a company? When you're on Twitter all the time, when you're being a judge at some pitch comp, like, those are all the things you need to steer. Like, that is the pop culture side of the industry, so to speak. And there are zero situations. And in fact, there are zero situations where those people have been successful, like really successful. And unfortunately, we're in a climate right now where we're saying, hey, we want more women entrepreneurs, more Black entrepreneurs, which absolutely we do, right? We do. But understanding that if you put them on stage all the time to talk about all the, hey, we're Goldman Sachs, we're giving a bunch of money away and we want to put you on stage to talk about this, you're actually doing them a disservice. It's like, give them the money and move on with your life. And
give them the money and let them do the work.
Yeah. Right. It's not about press appearances. That is the helpfulness. It doesn't really help. This is
so good. This is real talk about the way to get it done. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most people won't give you this real talk. So, but KP always brings the real.
That's because everybody's nice.
That's right. He's being kind to you right now. Okay. So I want to talk about the diversity or lack of diversity in funding. Is it getting better? I mean, are there strategies that could help us really move the needle? How do you look at that?
I think, it's getting better because people are trying, right? I look at it as like anything, there's growing pains. If I decide tomorrow I want to lose 20 pounds and run an 8-minute mile, like I might get there, but there's a lot of growing pains that happen along the way. I think it's great that as a country, as a market, we're focused on it, but it's a long game, right? It takes a lot of time. It takes, it just takes a lot of work effort. And I think it's great that we're focusing on it. I think what you have to look at is the root cause of how did we get here? And part of how we got here, so I look at it and say, everybody gets comfortable around their affinity groups. Like, that's just what it is, right? I might have more Indian friends. Why? Because I'm Indian. Like, that's the nature. I might have more Georgia Tech friends because I went to Georgia Tech. And I think it is a nature of affinity, regardless. I mean, there's, if it's racial affinity, it's racism, right? But there's all these other affinity groups that people get very comfortable with. And unfortunately, like venture capital is the worst about it. If you think about it, people will tell a startup like the best way to get in with the VC is to get an introduction, get a warm introduction. And it's like, well, what does that mean? That means, well, they needed to know KP from Georgia Tech or somewhere else. And there had to be a group of, there had to be a pattern of affinity to get to me or to get to someone else. And that's the problem, right? Why can't I just call? Like, why can't I just come in the front door, so to speak? And I think that's part of the problems. We're still very much affinity group driven and referral driven. And the human nature is we get comfortable with who the people that look like us, talk like us, want to kind of have shared experiences.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things at Georgia Tech, at ATDC, before I was in charge, it was like pretty much if you're a Georgia Tech alum, you got in. There was like people barely asked about your business.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that's not going to work for me. So I created a spreadsheet and a scoring system and said, no, we're going to have a scoring system. And being a Georgia Tech alum that doesn't count. That's not one of the scores.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think that's part of it. I think it's great that we're focusing on this. I would say I have a little bit of a reverse bias. I'm suspicious of anyone that has a slick, if you have a really slick pitch deck, I'm already suspicious. If you went to Harvard, I'm suspicious. If you worked at McKinsey or any of the other consulting companies, I'm very, very suspicious. Like, I kind of go the other way versus I like to look at someone's LinkedIn profile and go, oh, okay, so they were a server at a restaurant. Like they didn't go, they were a solid B student at kind of a B college sometimes. That's I think you have to look at what the strengths of people that have had to work hard, what that brings to the table.
Absolutely. And you also were telling me earlier that 17% of your startups are international?
No, so about 17% of our startups make it through our incubator process.
Okay, that's right.
The majority of our startups that we've invested in, we've never met in person. This is pre-COVID too. We decided if we were going to invest in a specific market like the built environment, we couldn't have a geography limitation because we wanted to find the best startup solving that problem anywhere in the country. And we just weren't going to spend a lot of time jumping on planes for that stuff. It's too expensive, quite honestly. So we built a very analytical system to analyze and do due diligence with startups without having to meet them and put them through all this pitching and all this other stuff. And I think the unintended consequence of that, quite honestly, is we've built a really good system that makes us very approachable. People go to our website, they fill out the application form. If we reject them, we tell them why. If we meet, their first meeting is with me, the general partner, and with my CTO. They never meet an analyst. Like, why would you want to meet an analyst? Analysts are to support me, not to be a blocking mechanism for the founder. And unfortunately, that's the system. So when you have to go through an analyst who's youngish and lacks experience, they're your first layer of bias, right? Because they're trying to look good to the people above them. And so it's easy to say, oh, this person went to MIT or this person did this. And if that person is not saleable upstream, you'll never get in through the front door.
Yeah. I feel like interviewing with you would be nerve-wracking for all the reasons that you just outlined. Like, you can't use all the fancy tricks and slick decks and bells and whistles that people tend to do and put together when trying to present themselves. So what is one interview question that you ask someone, whether you're thinking about investing in them or hiring them as an employee? Maybe they're different, but what's the one thing you ask?
For entrepreneurs, I really ask them questions about the problem they want to solve. And I'm a big believer you should spend 80% of your time studying the problem and then kind of 20% of your time solving for it. Because the solution may change. But I expect people to really understand the depths. When I say the depths of the problem, it's like math. When I ask you questions and I say, well, how much is X, Y, and Z? And you say ish, or you say, about, like you're done. Like I need to know I want to understand how detailed, how deep have you gone? Like, is it in your bones kind of thing? Because I think most entrepreneurs, the deep-rooted passion that, makes you kind of a weirdo is that fixation on the problem. It is just an absolute obsession about the problem. And I think it's a must-have. It's a must-have, right?
And I love the way you put that. It's a fixation on the problem, not the solution.
Right.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
And what about hiring an employee?
Hiring an employee, it depends on the role. I definitely, sometimes there could be a math problem. Sometimes there could be a logical.
This is what I'm saying. I would be totally nervous interviewing with you.
Most people should. I mean, it's like there's a little bit of, I'm gonna, I tell people like be impressive. No, don't be impressive with your words. Like be impressive with things be impressive around a point of view and that you've thought deeply about it. I don't want to hear the blog version or the Twitter version of things. And I kind of won't let people talk out of both sides of their mouth. It's a little bit of like, no, tell me more. And my team jokes around, they said, you're done when KP says, help me understand. If my question is help me understand, my team literally will turn off their camera and mute their Zoom because they're like, oh, he's like, this person's done. He got him. And so it's,
That's funny.
But I'll tell you, having a reputation of sometimes being difficult has been a real benefit to the companies we do invest in.
Because you get a better pool.
We get a better pool. There was one company we invested in, one of their major competitors that was also raising money, ended up not raising money. And I asked some of the other VCs that were looking at them like, dude, like you invested, you picked your winner. We don't want to do it. We don't want to go head to head with you. Like, because I'm pretty passionate about my startups. I'm very protective of them. And I'm a big fan of winning and losing. There are winners and losers. Mm-hmm. And the minute I invest in a company, every one of their competitors have a target on them. I'm putting a target on them. Like we will, and it's a very aggressive behavior. And so people that know me are like, oh, we don't want to, I will come for you. I'll recruit your people. I do not play nice. I will come. I'm coming for you. And my LPs appreciate that. My founders appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, you want that kind of support.
Yeah.
Because you really are kind of like family at that point, right? So you got to fight.
Yeah.
Okay. We have so many student questions and I want to make sure we get to them.
Sure.
And a lot of them are kind of along some of what we've been talking about. Well, we've kind of talked about this. Amit wants to know, what do you look for when you're thinking of investing in a company?
So really understanding the problem and the imperative of the problem, like how important, if you solve this problem, like how important is it? What is it going to mean? And the economics around that. There's this saying in venture capital, do you bet on the horse or do you bet on the jockey? What that basically means is betting on the horse is betting on the business, or you're going to bet on the CEO. My answer is I own the track, right? I don't care. And I think that comes from this idea of really, is it a problem worth solving? And if it's a problem worth solving, do you have the aptitude and attitude to go solve it? Because one of the things that people forget is like, you have to be, I don't think it's smart, like IQ smart. I mean, I think it's super important, but there's a certain cleverness you have to have as an entrepreneur. And are you coming up with a clever solution to it. But if the problem's not worth solving, it's too tiny. I mean, I had a call with the entrepreneur yesterday. I was like, if you do everything well, you will be a $10 million a year business. You should not take venture capital. You should do it yourself, because that'll be a nice little business. But don't take VC. And I think it's really important to understand, like, if you do well, what's the outcome of solving that problem? So that's what I really look at.
Very interesting. Lois wants to know why you started your own fund versus joining someone else's.
I don't play well with others.
I knew that was going to be the answer.
I just have like zero tolerance for certain things. And within venture, venture is very much, it's definitely like a lot of MBAs that have never done anything. And I didn't want to be in meetings all the time. I want to spend all my time with my founders. Mm-hmm. I want to spend all my time being side by side, working with them. I don't want to be in investment committees. And, I don't even believe in corporate retreats. I'm like, if I'm going to do a retreat, it's going to be with my family. I don't want to hang out with you people. And unfortunately, the politics of a firm, all of a sudden you get branded like, oh, he doesn't, like, I don't go out to happy hours and all that stuff. Like, yep, it's called work.
Yeah. It's funny. That actually matters. Although, I do know people that put in a lot of work that don't necessarily, I guess when we talk about the limelight, it's not as important, but there are people doing the work that aren't getting the appreciation and the recognition for the work they're doing. And like the people that do all the judging and blog writing and all the things you mentioned earlier are the ones that always get talked about. It's funny how we place importance on the wrong things.
Yeah. And I think that the thing is about that, the issue with that is it's a function of the spectators. Right. If you look at it, you say there's the players and there's the spectators. Mm-hmm. If there's an audience that wants to watch that, then those are the people that show up. Right. That's, if you look at reality TV, I look at reality TV and go, this is nonsense. Like, what is going on here? Someone's watching. Yeah. Right. Someone's watching it. So I think it's become a spectator sport of sorts. And, in the meantime, there's plenty of people out there doing the work and not talking about the work. Yeah.
Latrice wants to know, what do you love most about what you do?
I love that I get to work with multiple startups. I'm kind of an entrepreneur and engineer first. So I love that I get to apply engineering knowledge, my entrepreneurial experience. But to a certain degree, it's kind of like babysitting other people's kids. I get to give them back. Mm-hmm. And for me, where I am in my life, I like being able to just kind of work on the things that need to be done that I'm uniquely qualified to solve. Mm-hmm. And then do other things. I am super fortunate. I spend 100% of my time only doing the things that I love. I don't do anything else.
That's what we should all strive towards. That's success, I think, right? Yeah. All right, let's just go straight down the list because there are many. Nicholas wants to know, what is one thing you haven't done that you want to accomplish in the next 10 years?
That's a tough one. That's really a tough one. I talk myself out of a lot of things. Like there's stuff like, I think Atlanta really needs a live music venue. So I'm like calling friends up saying, hey, we should start and then I'm like, oh my God, that's a terrible business. We should never be in that business. So there's a lot of things like that. Honestly, my kids are now 20 and 18. And so when I look at the next 10 years, it's really about, giving them an unfair advantage in their life, whether it's through knowledge, capital, connections, whatever. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is they want to go off and accomplish. It's really been about building kind of foundational stuff. And then I am kind of continually working on some community impact things. I think, 4 years ago when I started this, decided like, hey, I'm going to be a venture capitalist 4 years ago. I also kind of decided I was building an army. And I think part of what I want to continue to do is build that army, because there's only so many hours in a day of what I can do. But it's all the people that I affect and help and teach and coach that really are going to be the next level of execution.
Mm-hmm. Mark wants to know, would you ever work for someone else?
No. I'm a terrible employee.
Yeah. No comment. Okay. Todd wants to know, how do you start having meaningful conversations with investors if you're still early in your career? Will they even really give you the time of day?
No, and nor should they. I think what people kind of forget is they think of like a track record as a checking the box, like, oh, I need to have a track record. And it's because somebody wants to check the boxes. They actually don't think about the value of having a track record. And I think, when people say, what should I do about, I want to go work at a startup. I want to go start a startup. I'm like, look, go get a job. Go get a job, understand how a big company works. If you ever want to create a big company, you need to understand how a big company works and do it early in your career before you actually you get frustrated. And there's a lot of things that would frustrate me that someone straight out of college won't. They're just how it is, right? So go work at a big company, understand how a big company works, understand the pros and cons of a big company. I think it's important. And then I say, like, go work for a startup. Maybe be number employee 50 or 100. Go get that experience. Then go be employee number 15. Then go be employee number 5, and then go start your own thing. And the reason being is this stuff takes time. It's really important to kind of put in that work and really understand all those, because if you think about it, if you're going to go grow something and go from 1 to 1,000, like, work backwards. What is it like to work at 1,000-person company and work backwards? Because then it gives you visibility and understanding of what your future will be. Mm-hmm. Not do that means you almost don't believe that you'll grow a big company. Like, how do you prepare yourself to grow a big company if you've never been there? So I always say, like, work backwards.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, a few more. Therese would like to know, what personality trait do you think has helped you the most, and do you think it can be learned?
Being a sore loser. I mean, it just, I don't know how you can teach that, or if you can teach that. I know I taught it. I coached my kids in soccer. I was probably the worst coach ever, but I used to tell all the kids, if you get a yellow card, I'll give you $20. Because if you're going to get, like, you don't want to get a red card, that's bad. But a yellow card tells me you're testing the boundaries of what is allowed. And that's a great thing. If you live your life never getting a yellow card, you'll never win, right? That's just how it is. That. And I think I want to see people that are constantly striving, like, it just comes naturally, it comes natural that they're going to get a yellow card because they're always going to push the limits of everything. And so I kind of taught my kids that early, like, I'll give you $20 if you get a yellow card kind of thing, which most parents don't want to hear that, because everybody's supposed to get a trophy apparently. But
started on that.
I just think, like, you kind of need to be a sore loser. You need to get pissed off at losing. And I think that is a trait. Maybe it can be taught. I've tried to teach my kids that, but they're better people than me.
Well, the spirit of that, though, is, I think, a winning spirit, right? So nobody wants to lose, but you have to really get upset if you do. So.
Yeah. I think it's like this, I agree. Like, you should, like, you're not going to win if you don't fail. You're going to fail along the way. But it doesn't mean, like, if your initial reaction to failure is like, well, it was a great learning experience, that is something.
Celebrate your failures, like that whole movement, I don't get.
Celebrating your failures is part of the healing process, but you have to, like, deal with first off, you should be pissed off. It should be very traumatic and you should be pissed off. And then over time, someone has to say, like, dude, like, move on. It's okay. Like, move on.
Yeah. It's like the 7 stages of grief or something
Right.
like that. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. All right. 2 more. Do you think things are going to go back to the way they were? This is Shayna asking.
No. I think it's super important that people understand that. There's a lot of things that will never go back. And I think there's a reason for it. It's not that the pandemic was a catalyst. It was not the cause, right? It was a catalyst for things that we already knew. We don't need 85 different types of craft brews out there. There's a lot of opulence that we've been living with. We don't need the level of variety. We don't need, there's a lot of waste that we don't need as a society. And we were all living very opulent in terms of how we thought about things. So I think there's some of that stuff that is, you know, kind of creative destruction, so to speak. It's a good thing. People don't like it, but it's a good thing. You know, it's, I think our focus on health and what's important around our health and the future of kind of healthcare and all is super important. We've proven that our, you know, we all kind of knew that our healthcare system was broken, and we kind of knew that, but now everybody knows it, right? It's not up for debate anymore. And I think, you know, unfortunately, you have to look at the math. You know, I'm a big Bitcoin person. I am a big proponent of, you've got to watch inflation. You've got to watch large monetary movements and what's going on in the world. And we're heading towards the next 20 years of the haves and the have-nots, that gap being bigger and bigger. And I think it's the decisions that people make today that will really decide, it will help them decide where they're going to be. Because I think the middle class is going to get decimated. And unfortunately, like, rich people know how to live rich, poor people know how to live poor, right? They're very good at it. That's what they know. Middle class does not know how to live poor. And I think that's where we're heading. And I think people just have to take a beat and say, okay, I have to make decisions today. Because if you think about, if you make it, and this is good for young folks, right? Make a spreadsheet of what you spend money on, and tell me which one of those things does not have the opportunity to increase. Your rent will go up. I mean, people just don't notice. I mean, I notice because I'm a weirdo, but like, since the pandemic, my dog's dog food's gone up like $15 a bag. Mm-hmm. I'm watching it, right? And you got to watch the pennies. And I think people really need to understand like what's going on in the world and start making those early decisions. Because if you wait too long, you know, basically don't spend money. Don't buy into this consumerism thing. Do not buy, you know, everybody got a stimulus check and they're expected to go spend it. Do not spend it. Do not save it. Go make it into something bigger. Go do something with it.
So good.
Don't go trade GameStop or anything, but generally, you know, I really think a third of your income should go to investing. A third of your income should go to investing. A third should go to like your backstop of cash, and the other third, you know, you shouldn't spend more than a third of the money you make. And people are like, that's insane.
Make more money.
Yeah, there's a reason why I don't buy any clothes. It's very expensive. It's all very expensive.
All right, last question. What is the coolest tech you have invested in? This is Gavin. What is the coolest tech you've invested in, and what is something where you missed the opportunity and you regret it?
So the coolest company we were early investors in is a company called Icon 3D. They do 3D printed houses. We were one of their first investors, clearly because concrete, robotics, you know, it was kind of like a no-brainer. And they called me early on, and I was involved very early and invested very early in Icon. So that's probably one of the coolest ones we have in our portfolio. And if you Google them, you know, they have a lot of cool videos, so people really like them. So there's a thing in venture, we call it our anti-portfolio. So we actually track the deals we passed on. And you,
that would be maddening, I think.
oh yeah, like everything we do is, I mean, if you're doing it right, you're driving yourself crazy, right? And so I do track some of our anti-portfolio. We're early, so we haven't had anything that's been too out of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed out on that. There was a time where there were several companies that I felt like we missed out on. The pandemic kind of fixed that, but we're a little bit early. There's nothing really. There are some personal investments I wish I would have just had time to spend more time with and put some money into. On the consumer side, there's a small company here in Atlanta called Revolution Gelato. I helped him out super early and then just got busy, and he was raising money and I got busy, and I think he's doing pretty well these days. And, I don't know that it would have been like a huge investment for me, but just being like, I wish I could have been more supportive financially and time wise. That's the stuff I get. There's entrepreneurs that I try to help out, and then unfortunately, like I just don't have enough hours in the day, and that's the stuff I really get to. I don't regret on money stuff. I mean, I literally spend no money. I mean, I'm so like, people wonder why I care about making money when I don't spend any of it. I give away a lot. My kids consume their fair share, but other than that, I really, it's really more I regret not being able to spend more time with entrepreneurs that I think I could have helped.
Mm-hmm. Even Warren Buffett picks up pennies off the ground. That they add up.
I mean, so my attitude is really, it's money, but it's also just waste. Like, I'm this person that I keep all the envelopes, when they say, mail your bill in and they're still sending, I keep all those return envelopes. I write on the back of pieces of paper as scrap.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah.
I just keep everything and reuse everything, and I just don't want to waste stuff. It's more of a footprint thing. But yeah, I'm also just damn cheap.
Yeah. I haven't bought a pad of paper and I can't tell you how long.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are so out of time. We're like overtime. So KP, thank you so much for joining us. Students, thank you for joining us and for all the great questions today. You can find us everywhere on the web and on our website, supernovacommence.com. Unfortunately, today is our last show. Haha, just kidding, April Fools. You didn't think that was going to go by without me actually doing something. No, we have all kinds of great shows coming up and great guests. So check the website out. We have a big update going up today for the next about 8 weeks. So lots of great people coming up. KP, do you have any closing thoughts for our students today?
Not really. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I always make time for students. I don't really manage my LinkedIn that much because it gets busy, but my analyst knows that if it's a student, I always make time for them. So definitely hit me up, and if there's something you want to chat about, happy to chat.
That is very kind. All right, students, we use that word a lot here. So make sure that you're not just being nice this week, but you are being kind to people. And remember, it's a blessing to be a blessing. So have a great week and make the most of all this like virtual stuff. And we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.